It's been a battle filled with controversy, but the state government has managed to get its state of emergency powers extended until the end of the year after convincing the Greens and crossbenchers to support it. Joining us now, one of them from the Reason Party, Fiona Patten. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Brett.
I do have to ask you about this, though, first. We've just heard from the Attorney-General, Christian Porter, denying historic rape allegations. I want to ask you about the details of that. But as an MP, do you think it's appropriate for him to continue in his role with that hanging over him?
Look, there certainly is a presumption of innocence, but in cases like this, and particularly when we're looking at this acute toxic nature of Parliament, I would have thought now would have been a very good time for our chief law officer of this country to stand aside and allow a proper inquiry to be undertaken, an independent inquiry. Certainly he has every right to deny these allegations, certainly he has every right to be presumed innocent, but just at the moment, just at this point in time in Australia and Australian politics, now would be a great time for him to I think stand aside and do that with elegance.
We haven't heard anything more from Scott Morrison since Christian Porter came out with this response, so we'll wait to hear that from Canberra shortly. In the meantime, let's talk about what's happening locally. You've had some very strong reaction already since you made that decision to support the government's extension of the state of emergency, haven't you?
Look, I have, Brett, and I knew that was going to happen, and certainly this is a very emotive issue. But sometimes I think it's because people misunderstand that every state in Australia is currently operating under a declaration of a state of emergency, and Victoria is no different. And this enables us to ensure that someone who tests positive isolates, that close contacts of positive people who are positive, they can be directed to isolate. It ensures that we can insist on masks on public transport. It's a whole range of things. It's not necessarily about a lockdown, but as I've always attested, what I want is specific legislation. And my support for this bill was actually because I see this as an exit ramp out of state of emergency and into some more specific health-related pandemic legislation.
What does it tell you then about the way the state of play in Victoria at the moment that, from what I heard, you actually had someone make a death threat to you today about this?
That's right. I think I'm frightened because I think there's a lot. I'm not frightened for myself. You know, I'm a tough girl. I can look after myself, and certainly I've got people to protect me in Parliament. However, it's the misinformation, and it's the fear and anger that's being perpetuated out there, that's being promoted by people who should know better. And certainly we saw this in the chamber. We've seen that in some websites that have been authorised by political parties telling half-truths about the effect of this legislation and the effect that this will have on people. I understand we want certainty, but if we keep living in declarations of state of emergency, we can't get that certainty, but we can't move forward. And I have been dedicated and single-minded to find a way to create specific legislation, and we have now got that ball rolling, and we are now on the way to getting out of a rolling state of emergency, and we will be the first state in Australia to do it.
Are there any particular MPs that you feel have raised the temperature too high with things they've been saying inside the House?
Look, there's been some conspiracy theorists abounding, and I don't think it comes as any surprise if you look at someone like Bernie Finn, who, really, is a climate change denier, has a whole bunch of wacky ideas and talks to a whole bunch of wacky people. But what he does is he increases the temperature in the room, and that actually does have dangerous ramifications, because we are leaders, and we should be here to lead and to conduct ourselves with respect. And him and many others have not done that. They have been degrading to other members of Parliament. They have perpetuated mistruths or misrepresentations of legislation or misrepresentations of comments that people have said. And that does everyone a disservice. And I have actually been speaking to the presiding officers at Parliament about maybe we do need some form of code of conduct for parliamentarians in Victoria.
Well, you mentioned one opposition MP there. Let's talk about the opposition overall, because they say that you've given extreme power to Daniel Andrews until Christmas. Is there any oversight over those powers?
Of course there's oversight, and you know these are not it's not extreme powers. This is the Chief Health Officer making declarations to ensure on his expert medical advice to ensure that Victoria stays safe. So these are things like the last declaration, which because of my work, the declaration is tabled in Parliament every month that it's needed, and MPs are given a briefing by the Health Minister and the Chief Health Officer. But this is advice saying, well, look, for the next 4 weeks, I think we should continue to wear masks on trams, for example. Or for the next 4 weeks, I think that people who have COVID should remain isolated for 14 days. Those are the sorts of declarations, those are the sorts of extreme powers that we're talking about. Generally speaking, they're common sense. And if things like if there was a massive outbreak in New South Wales, the Chief Health Officer may say, you know what, we probably need to restrict people from the CBD of Sydney visiting Melbourne. Right. That's what you would see in a declaration.
Fiona Patten, we're out of time, but thank you for your time today. Fiona Patten there from the Reason Party.